Hi, Anson. Welcome to the Buy, Grow, Sell podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
My pleasure indeed. Um, Anson, I know we're going to get to talk about your business, Battery, and I know you've actually run a few different companies in your history there. But maybe you could kick off and just give us a little bit of your background and kind of what led to you, being a co-founder of Battery.
Yeah. Good question. Without trying to deliver too long of an answer, I was born to two entrepreneurs. I think both of my parents are entrepreneurs in very different ways. So it was definitely something that, whether I realized it or not, subconsciously probably was within me. And then, once I graduated university, I started working in video games development and got into marketing. And at that time, the games industry was really starting to shift from, physical discs that were sold at retail to now what the games industry is, downloadable content, over the internet. And so with Battery, my latest company, we saw an opportunity with the video game industry to help we knew the products needed to be marketed a different way with just this huge shift in how consumers were consuming them. So Battery was originally started off as a means to help the video game industry, and then we grew and leapfrogged into a lot of other different industries from there.
Yeah, nice. I'm curious, you mentioned your two parents there. It's, I've met so many different entrepreneurs and business owners over the years, and I just have this question in my mind as to, are entrepreneurs somewhat born or are they made? Often I think the question gets asked about leadership in a lot of ways too. But, do you think, were your parents were obviously, it sounds like they were a very, very big influence in your thinking and I guess the way you approach business?
Yeah, no, they were. On one side, my mom had a very flashy business because she was a sitcom director in Hollywood in the 80s. So directed like
Wow.
A-Team and What's Happening Now and LA Law, quote unquote, very sexy
Cool.
stuff. And my dad was probably
Yeah.
on the opposite side of that. He was an optometrist. Not that taking care of people's eyeballs isn't sexy, but it's not quite as, cool on the surface as that. But, just I think hanging out in my dad's office as a kid and taking out the trash and just working in his office, and then being babysat on movie sets and TV sets. And Mr. T used to let me, hold all of his gold chains and hand me his fake AK-47s, which, is totally normal in LA, right? It sounds like such a bizarre upbringing, but I think just physically and literally just being around businesses and seeing that, it definitely kind of infused in me. And then again, long story short, I was raised in the Mormon church and I served a Mormon mission in Brazil. And so then I kind of honed the sales aspect. I have since left the Mormon church, long story, but, then I learned really how to be a sales guy, just literally knock door to door for 2 years. Yeah. So I think that mix of, learning sales, if you consider religion sales, and then just being raised literally on the floor of businesses kind of just infused it in me, I think.
Yeah, that is so cool. I reckon I was going to say every kid my age, because I still don't think I've grown up properly, but I reckon everybody our age is like, you just described the best childhood ever. We all wanted to be on the scene with B.A. Baracus. Come on.
And he was always so nice to kids. He was not, he was always nice to adults, but for kids, he was the best.
That's cool. That's really cool. So obviously I'll focus a little bit on Battery because I know you've got a number of different things in your background, but you're a co-founder. So how did that start? I'm sort of curious. Businesses start. People go into business sometimes with friends or ex-colleagues. Was it well planned? Did you fall into it? What were the early days like?
Yeah, so I started it with someone else named Phil, who's still my business partner and co-founder till today. He was definitely much more on the creative side, and I was a bit more on the marketing and sales and business side. I joke, well, it's not a joke. I'm not talented enough to be 100% of a creative, and I'm probably not smart enough to be 100% of a business guy. So of course you go into advertising, which is, a mix of both. And Phil and I were very but yet he had enough of a business mind and had a huge creative mind. I had a bit more of a business mind with a bit. So it truly was this kind of yin and yang. And I think it was just that respect from the beginning. And we were very adamant, realized we needed each other. We needed each other's brains, and neither of us could do it by ourselves. Obviously, even the two of us together could not do it, hence you grow. But we were very specific and realized what each of us brought to the table. So we had worked
Yeah.
together previously. And then again, had this
Okay, I was
idea
going to
about
ask.
video
Yeah.
games and this and that, and then came together.
Yeah, sweet. I was going to ask how the relationship came about, whether it was, did you meet as colleagues or was it friends? And, I think there's always this question of going into business with your friends and can that cause issues? And obviously we've seen it cause issues, but but yeah, so, okay, so you worked in a previous life together, formed the relationship. Obviously you get to know each other a little bit and trust each other and you see the fit. So
Yeah.
that's the history. Yeah, cool. Okay. When you started the company, was there any kind of discussion around long-term vision in terms of what do we actually want to build here? Or was it more just, you guys kind of saw an idea and you're just going for it?
A little bit of both. Probably at the beginning, more of an idea, and we were going for it. Again, that idea about the games industry, but we were also very adamant that we weren't just building a video game marketing company. We knew we wanted to leapfrog and move into other categories. We were very specific in the beginning about mapping it out. Wow, wouldn't it be nice to go here and go there, and we could bring this video game model to alcohol or to youth marketing for banking, but it was definitely more focused on filling that immediate need. I mean, with any new business, I think it's impossible for any new business to build a 5-year plan or God knows a 10-year
Yeah.
plan. At the beginning, you're just trying to make payroll and just, trying to tread water. We were trying to think long term, but it's so difficult. It's so tough to do that,
Yeah. You get dragged back into the immediate pretty quickly when you've got a burning platform, right?
Yeah, right. And you can't make payroll. You can't keep the lights on.
Exactly right. Yeah. No, I've been there. I've been involved in a few startups, and it's I think you take a moment to think, geez, wouldn't that be nice in the future? And then that's about as long as I think you can afford to give it. So it is far more immediate. But so talk to me a little bit about how you got started, and I've seen that you've had some amazing clients over the years, which I'm sure you'll expand on. But what did those early sort of days look like? Did you get some quick traction? Did you have to put capital in to keep the business going at the beginning? What were those early sort of years looking like?
Yeah. We so it was a little bit of both. We had a few big clients who really took a chance on us, clients who had known us from previous companies and previous businesses. So we had some big name clients who honestly just took a chance on us. And when we were 3, 4 people in a room, we had no business, working on budgets that big in those clients. But I think the personal relationships and our past experience had carried us over. But it's very much probably the typical tale of entrepreneurs of not only not taking salaries, but selling homes and putting that money directly into the bank account and lines of credit. But again, when you're a new company, it's very difficult to get a loan. It's very difficult to get a line of credit. But luckily, with these big name clients, we were able to get some lines of credits and loans. So, hugely indebted to those people who, took a chance on us.
Yeah, that's awesome. Without wanting to get too personal, I don't know. Are you married? Do you have kids? If so, were you married at the time? Like, what was the personal life like at going through those early stressful stages?
Yeah, no, both of us, both Phil and I, still married, thank God, both still married and both have kids. And my second was born 2 months after we started Battery. And I look back on that and
Oh
think,
man.
wow, was I just insane? Or was I just so full of hubris and maybe a combination of both? But I can't. I still can't believe that that's how the timing worked out. But you don't think of it at that time. You're just going. So I mean, obviously, kudos to our wives for doing everything they did to support us.
Yeah. Oh man, I get it. Yeah. My wife and I have done every business together. And our first one, we started basically, and she'd just given birth to our second child as well. So I know you sort of look back and go, what was on our minds at that time? My goodness. But yeah, I think for me, I didn't know I'd spend time in and out of corporate. So sometimes it was easy to know what I didn't want to go back to. So it's like, well, there's only one way forward.
Yeah.
So Yeah. And when did you, so you said four people in a room and all the rest of it. Can you give me an idea? I know you started in 2013, but can you talk to me a little bit about the growth of the business? I don't know if you can talk generally about revenue and stuff like that, but certainly staff and whatever else.
Yeah. So, pretty early on in late 2014, Warner Brothers was one of our first big clients, in the video games division. So for, household franchises like Lego and Batman and Mortal Kombat. And, our revenue, tripled and quadrupled then from 2014 to 2015, on the backs of these big, global video game campaigns. And so we were, it was a pinch yourself moment when we're on the back lot of Universal Studios, blowing up buildings with crews of, 200-300 people shooting, the Batman video game commercial. It was part of holy crap. I don't know if you can curse on this. I'll say crap. Holy
You
crap.
certainly can.
Okay. Holy fuck. No, holy crap. We better really do this now. We just blew up a building, to then the other side of, oh my God, we just blew a building. This is awesome. This is great. But, we're not pitching ourselves in front of the clients. We're acting like we've been there before. And so, Warner Brothers is big. And so that really helped us, grow our staff quite a bit more. But even at that time when we're, writing scripts for Batman, it was just, 4 or 5 people in a room, because at that time it was challenging because it was project based, right? Yes, Batman is big, but it's a 5-month project. So how can you really staff full-time people for 5-month projects? You can't, because you don't want to let them go. So there's a lot of freelancers and a lot of temporary employees, which become very expensive and obviously very costly to the P&L and the bottom line. And then the company slowly started to shift to more retainer, annual clients rather than these big, in and out project jobs.
Yeah. Well, I think you've just described the perennial problem for every professional services company, right? I think I know, and I speak for myself here too. I think you start out doing a lot of project work and looking for how do we mature this business into something more stable and reliable. And did you find that transition a challenge with your clients?
So that's when we started to expand in different industries. When we went into alcohol with Mike's Hard Lemonade, or financial services with the Royal Bank of Canada, or today food with Land O'Lakes Dairy. And then we were able to move into these categories where annual retainers were more customary versus entertainment. A lot of times what we find, it's very job focused, it's very project focused, it's very short term focused, and then moving into these, leapfrogging into these other adjacent categories allowed us to build those entertainers and then hire the full time and then convert, because at that time we were probably 90% freelancer temp employee and 10% full time. And then, now we're, the opposite of that. And I think it really took not just maturing as a company, but moving into those categories where that was more customary than entertainment.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's so I think a lot of companies do struggle to make that kind of transition. Is there what do you feel like? I don't know if you want to share what sort of underpins an ongoing service with a lot of your clients. I mean, I can see a project, right? Oh, we're going to shoot this thing. We're going to blow up this building. It's all big, very very specific. So what does that regular sort of client look like?
You mean in terms of the more longer annual retainer clients?
Yeah, like what sort of services are you providing in those kind of scenarios?
Yeah, so that's like you said, it's definitely more long term than short term. It's mapping out the year. Where is the business going? Do they have a new product innovation? Are they moving into a new market? Are they expanding their customer base? A lot more strategic focus, a lot more mapping their business to the consumers, and then coming up with those creative ideas, whether it's commercials, billboards, digital, social, etc. It's definitely more these much more less defined scopes in terms of what, we know where we want to go, but we don't know how we're going to get there, versus, yes, to your point, here is this video game. It comes out this date. Here is the budget. Obviously it's not as easy as go blow up a building, but it's more of a strategic, longer term
Yeah.
focus.
Yeah, nice. Um, And what's the trajectory? So how big's the firm now in terms of staff?
So staff were about 75 people. So those are full time in LA and Chicago. And then we have a few people we've started to hire in Toronto and Shanghai out in China.
Yeah, cool. That's an interesting one. I'll pick on for a second, but what was the move like into Shanghai? I mean, clearly, cultural differences, even the legal system is very, very different. How did you find that move?
Yeah, so in Shanghai right now, we focus on video games. So it's largely mobile gaming publishers that are based in China that are looking to market their games to Western territories. We are definitely not the experts of I wouldn't know how to market a game in China for the life of me. But these games who have grown so much in Asia, they're then looking to expand to Europe or North America or Asia, let's say Australia, New Zealand, et cetera. Non Asian countries in that part of the world, and then Latin America. So the one part is it's an industry that we know because it's games and it's territories that we know. But yes, the client relationship, the way clients do business, wow. I mean, it is just completely different than we know. And just in terms of educating them on, when you blow up the building, you need insurance and the certain types of actors, just everything that we take for granted here. A lot of those rules either don't apply or they're different. So much of it is educating clients there on that. But yet we're leaning back on territories we know and consumers we know and industries we know. But obviously the relationship with the clients is very, very different. So different.
Yeah, yeah, it's fascinating. It's I've done a little bit of work around sort of cross-border transactions and growth and stuff like that, and it's you're right. There's so many things too that I think when people start out with this idea of we'd like to expand in this other territory, there's so many things they don't even think of until they're in the actual territory and experiencing it. So it can be certainly can be a highly rewarding activity, but obviously high risk too, particularly when there's different languages, different legal systems, different. I think going from the US to Australia, it's like, we're all pretty similar. We just sound a little bit different. But look, it's we even have a team in the Philippines, and we go to Singapore a bit. It's interesting. So at what point on your journey? So obviously, Battery, you've been through a transaction and brought on some investors. Can you talk to me a little bit about, and I'd love to get into what that looked like in terms of how you find them and what do they actually acquire and all that sort of stuff. But what was the sort of trigger for you in your business journey where you realized you perhaps needed some external capital or further investment? And what was underpinning that?
So, I mean, when Phil and I started the business, we had an idea or an inkling or a hypothesis, whatever you want to call it, that there would come a time where to truly scale, we couldn't do it organically. We couldn't bootstrap it, that we would need to bring on either funding or VC or agency holding company. We knew there would come a time to do that. We just obviously had no idea when. So pretty early on, we started interviewing bankers and saying, hey, we think at some point we're going to need to do this. We don't know how to do it, but help us structure the company so when we're ready, we'll be ready. And we found a group of bankers who we really liked, and they were amazing and stayed with us for, I want to say it was about 3-4 years before we even did the transaction. They just said, hey, you know what? You got to put this in place from a CFO. You have to put this in place, put that in place. Think about that. Very, very, very light touch. And then it got to the point where we did this work for Netflix, where Netflix came to us and asked us to help launch them into stand-up comedy. Because back then, Netflix did not have every Kevin Hart special and Chris Rock special, and they sent HBO, right? And Showtime really owned that. So we came up with this idea called Netflix is a Joke, and it blew up into something much, much bigger globally than we could have thought. And we started to get a lot of knocks on our doors for opportunities that we just couldn't complete. It was so disheartening because it was these big, huge opportunities that we knew we just flubbed. And we flubbed a couple of them, to be perfectly honest. And it got to that point, said, okay, imagine if we had this and that. I think this is now the time. So we said to the bankers, all right, let's go through the process. And it took about a year, and we went and met with a lot of different, whether it was VCs funding us, or I shouldn't say VCs, private equity, or do we sell the whole thing? Do we sell a percentage? So we went through a process, and we landed on Habas and really liked them. And I can go into that if it makes sense. But that was really the process of knowing that we would need to do it at some point, getting ready, and then pulling the trigger when we were getting the opportunities that we just couldn't handle on our own.
That's a really interesting journey, and I think for me already there's a couple of really great takeaways there. But and the first being that it was really opportunity it was almost like there's opportunity cost, right? It's not, hey, if we build it, they will come. It was, hey, if we don't do this, we're going to be losing out on a massive opportunity. And I think that from both as an entrepreneur, founder, business owner perspective is de-risked. But therefore, it's also de-risked for investors, right? They can see it. You don't have to convince them that there's this magic pot of gold down the road if you just throw money at us. And I think that's a great lesson for business owners out there who are thinking about raising capital. Don't assume you'll go and create a market. You need the opportunity to be there and available and visible to want to convince investors to come on board. Can I take one step back though, because you mentioned these bankers and the working with you a little bit over a period of time, and I'm just curious, was there one or two kind of really key things they advised you on that hey, you need to implement this in your business? Like, was there a couple there that you think really made a massive difference to you, or perhaps was something that you just hadn't been thinking about, wasn't on your radar, that really added an enormous amount of value to your business?
So they helped upgrade our finance and operations. And when I say upgrade, I mean actually build our finance and operations, and introduce us to the gentleman at that time who became our CFO, and introduced the CFO and said, hey, at that time, our CFO came in, instituted all the things you would normally have to have in a professional services firm, the ability to manage project P&Ls better, time entry management, even our 401ks, our health plans, just all the finance and operate, just the building blocks. And they introduced us to him, and I think we hired him before we had even met him in person, because we had already actually known of him, the work he had done with other agencies. So that was a massive. And from there, just the dominoes fell.
Yeah, wow. Do you know, it's so timely we're having this conversation, because we just did one of our monthly mail outs to our clients and our list of people in our community, and we were talking about the importance of getting your finance function running properly. And part of this has come from the fact that we've got a number of clients we've represented in the past, even that we're representing now, who are into significant 8-figure turnover and don't have a CFO. In fact, they still are using the lady who's self-taught on MYOB, managing the books, and it's like, seriously, guys, like, it's not just about somebody punching in entries into MYOB. There's a financial strategic piece here that would add an enormous amount of value to your business. And I just think a lot of, particularly family-run businesses, it's easy just to keep doing what you're doing without kind of stepping out of things and saying, well, hang on, what are we actually missing here? I'm curious, and I don't want to, once again, pry on something that might be too personal, but can you give us an indication of your turnover at the time? You don't have to say a number, but was it 7 or 8 figures? Can you share something like that?
Yeah, it was 8 figures. So it was over 10 million at the time before we did the transaction. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's interesting, right? Because and it's actually what we said in this message is, if you're hitting 10 million, you don't have somebody in your team whose responsibility it is to help with this stuff, you could be missing stuff that's going to cost you a lot more money than that person's salary package. So that's really interesting, and it's great to see that. Look, it's just another example of where it's had a massive impact and obviously helped you grow your business.
Yeah.
That's cool. So leading into the sort of transaction side of things, from the time you guys had this moment, you realize actually maybe now's the time to bring in some external investors. How long did that process take? What did it look like? Did you engage advisors to run the whole thing? Can you give us a flavor of that part of the process?
Yeah, so our bankers served as those advisors as well. Before then, there had been some companies that had approached us. So we sat with the advisors. Okay, let's look at who's approached us in the past. Do we go back to them now? Bankers, who do you think we should go out to? And they came up with a
Yep.
list, and then we came up with a third list together, and then we prepared our materials, prepared our deck, and to your point, the opportunities that we were getting but couldn't fulfill at our size, prepared all of our whatever it was at the time, 2, 3, 4 year financials, and started those conversations. So met with definitely 10 plus different companies at the time, and then honed in on Havas, and then it was probably about a 12-month process, and then it was June of 2019 that we signed the deal with Havas.
Yeah, nice, nice. So, sorry, what was the total length of the process?
Yeah, I'd say it was about 12 months or so. It was probably about summer to
Yeah.
summer, and maybe even a little bit before that. But yeah, probably 12 to 18 months or so. It definitely took a lot longer than I thought it would take. Even when we, honed in with Havas, I just, again, there's so many things. And when you're dealing with these multinational global companies with 80 offices, there's a lot of hoops to jump through on their side. So took a lot longer than I would have thought before that.
Yeah, yeah. Once again, so many really awesome things to unpack there, and tips for business owners listening. One for me, when you said 12 months, I went, "Yep, that's about standard." I always say to our clients, "You got to give us 12 months. Like we might get it done in 9, but it might take 15 or 18, just depending on your scenario." And the last thing you want to do is rush something for the matter of a couple of months that's going to change your life forever. So it's you got to get this right, and you want to be as efficient and quick as you can without rushing to the point that you're making mistakes and missing stuff. And that can
Yes.
be a delicate balance, I think, for some people. And I don't know, as a business owner, did you feel frustrated through that process, or did you just have the confidence it was in hand? How did you feel during that time?
Completely frustrated. No, I mean, there was emotions were going the gamut from A to Z. At times, honestly, it was really challenging. It very easy to take your eye off the ball. We're Phil and I are here to
Yeah.
run a business, yet feel like you have a conference call with 7 lawyers every day to go over the purchase agreement or the LOI. Very difficult. I found it very difficult to
Yeah.
compartmentalize those things. I wish we were all robots, but emotions come into play, and it becomes an emotional. I mean, it was a roller coaster. It was a difficult process. So many learnings. So many things I do differently. Thankfully, it ended okay, but I found it very tough, really tough.
Yeah. Yeah. That's. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, I think it's people don't often talk about what was going on in their head. I think we're too used to the Instagrammable post. Oh, we started a business, and then 5 years later we raised $10 million or whatever it is, and hey, we're all just so super successful and so easy. Like, and obviously that's what this show's about, is to say, hey, like, what's it actually like? What's it really like? And for some people, that is their story, but I would say that's like 2% of people. Everybody else has a bit more of a journey to go through.
And those people are still lying. Even
Yeah.
the 2% are still a bit full of BS. That's my experience.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you. Can you talk to me, once again, cognizant of confidentiality here? When you brought on the investor, was it a minority stake? Was it a majority stake? So what did you sell? And if you can't tell us the valuation, if you can, great. But if you can't, can you tell us what methodology or mechanism do they use to calculate the number?
Yeah, it was really traditional as it relates to agency holding companies, buying agencies. So it was a controlling stake, which was public at that time, and then a multi-year earnout, which is very common in these type of transactions, because a lot of times the holding companies are buying the founders or buying the people, that are in the business. And, the earnout is, an earnout of that initial stake. And then, eventually, and we're still in the middle, of that earnout right now. And, pretty typical calculations of, top line revenue, and bottom line, EBIT, and, a formula that stretches out, longer than the Golden Gate Bridge to, calculate those formulas, but pretty traditional, in terms of, buying that stake and then earning out that stake over a number of years.
And that is an important and really important thing to note here, particularly with professional services companies, that earnouts are very common. There is such a human element to the business and what underpins value. So buyers are looking to manage risk with those earnouts. In terms of the valuation itself, was it just a multiple of EBITDA or something like that, or was there another mechanism they used?
Yeah, it was that, a combination of EBITDA and top line, obviously at that time, looking at formulas of what other agencies are going for, in our space. At that time, we were just a creative agency, so we weren't data, we weren't media. So, I would assume from their side, it's comparing, again, Havas, being such a big company. We were one of, multiple transactions they did that year in different countries across the world. So they had their own centralized M&A, machine to go through it. And it definitely, a traditional method of calculating that on their end.
Yeah. And I think that's also a really important point for people, because I see a lot of people, they go and get valuations, and I think in some cases, they'll speak to their accountant, and often it's easy to do some basic formulas to try to determine a company valuation. But I think, and certainly what I'm hearing from you is that the buyers, what they're relying on is previous transactions. What's actually really happening in the market, not a theoretical calculation to the side. It's, well, we know of 20 businesses just like yours that have sold, and here were the variables that were across those businesses, and here's where we think you sit. That real life kind of rubber meeting road, I think, is so important for people who are thinking about valuing their business or understanding, what it might be worth or what they want it to be worth.
Yeah, I think so too. And honestly, that's what appealed to us about not selling 100% of it. For a lot of people, earnouts can be really bad, or it can be really good, or it can be somewhere in the middle. But, we believe that our best years were still ahead of us. So therefore, that's what is theoretically good or should be good about an earnout. You have that time to then grow your business to a higher valuation when your earnout is complete. Obviously, it can go the exact opposite way. If your business contracts, then it's less. But that's the deal we all sign. Going into
look, like absolutely. I mean, there's always risk in business, right? And I've certainly had a few guests on our show that they've kept a portion, whether it was, could have been 15, 20%, can be more, whatever. But I've had a number of them that when they eventually sold that final portion, which was a much smaller stake, they actually got more money for that smaller portion than they did in the initial transaction, because the company had grown so much. And so, and I think that's obviously the founder's dream, right? If you're going to hang around, you kind of want that second bite of the cherry. So look, I think all those things are certainly possible. But look, I do like your point there. I mean, it is important to understand that there is the potential it doesn't go that way. And I guess equally, we've had a lot of people on this show that have walked away from earnouts because they just weren't happy too. So, so it leads me kind of to my next question. I mean, how important was culture and relationships and the way you felt about the buyers? How important is that piece when you're speaking to prospective acquirers?
I mean, we're in a people business, right? Because we're selling hours of people's time and a creative business. So I think that was very important to us. Also, very difficult to truly gauge. We had never met any of these people before, yet we did feel like we got along well with them. And I guess that's the good thing about the process. It's not as if we met them on a Friday and we sold the company on a Monday. No, it was, it's a multi-month process, and you do get to know them a lot better throughout that process. And, theoretically, obviously, either side could back away before the deal is signed, and neither side did. And the more we got to know them, the better we liked them. And look, I know this sounds cheesy, but we're now a few years in, and they constantly surprise me that they're actually better than I would have thought. And I never would have thought in a million, and I'm not trying to be the 2% Instagrammer, but I think we did truly, find some really great people who've actually surprised us, through the years. Still plenty of time
look,
for
that's awesome.
all of it to go to shit. But for now, it's okay.
Well, listen, I mean, first of all, congratulations. I mean, look, I think that's fabulous. I think what you've described there is what most people hope for. And, I think there's, I think if I can extrapolate from your story a little bit here, it's, if you want to get to that kind of right outcome, you really need to have the right people on board around you, helping you deliver the right kind of process and give yourself enough time to find the right outcome. And I think the hard part for most business owners, and correct me if you had a different experience here, but I think most of them start out realizing they need to do something, but you don't actually know what that end result actually looks like. Even from a deal structure, you can't say, I want this exact deal structure at the beginning, because the buyers are going to be all completely different and have their own views. So that level of uncertainty is hard for people to manage.
No, you're absolutely right. Each buyer has their own agenda and what they're trying to do, and we're not always privy to that. I mean, and I think throughout the whole process, it's just eating a big slice of humble pie. I do think entrepreneurs are a lot like politicians. We kind of do have egos. That's why we start businesses, because we think we can do it better than someone else. Not too dissimilar to a politician having a pretty big ego. And at least my experience has really been humbling. It's been slapped in the face. It's been punched, thankfully not literally, but it's been saying, no, Anson, you don't know what's right. You need to hire someone who knows it, because you don't know what's right. And I think that becoming less full, I think we all have healthy egos. That's what makes us entrepreneurs, and that's wonderful. But I think over time, it's gotta be less, because the business just can't, at least our business can't grow with that mindset.
Yeah. Look, and I think that's a universal principle. So appreciate you sharing it. It's so important. And so I'm cognizant of time. You've been so generous so far in sharing your story with us. I really love it. Do you? I don't know. Are you happy for people to reach out and connect with you? I don't know if you can maybe even talk us through. I don't know if you're in Australia, by the way, or if you have clients in Australia. Like, what sort of people do you guys? Yeah. Well, welcome to come and open an office. I'm more than happy to show you around. So, I'm sure there's a business trip in there somewhere. But are you cool with people reaching out and connecting with you?
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Obviously, I've got your LinkedIn details there and whatnot. But I don't know. We've got a few minutes. Is there? I don't know if it's worth you talking through more about what you guys are doing, or if there's anywhere we want to point people in terms of what you guys do or who you're helping and how you can help.
Yeah, I mean, just our site, batteryagency.com, you can see all the buildings we're blowing up. Unfortunately, we haven't blown up buildings in a while. But yeah, you can just see everything, we're up to there. I mean, I think obviously the video game industry is so interesting, with social networking and where that's going. And obviously, how will the recession, impact global markets? Very sensitive to that with our different clients.
Yeah.
It can be challenging with the global currency these days as the dollar becomes stronger against other currencies. Battery becomes more expensive for some of our clients.
Yes.
So there's a lot of challenges that we're trying to deal with. That was not the answer that you were probably looking for, but it's a challenging time for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, from certainly looking at the size of the clients you help and the kind of work that you do with them, it's you're not selling widgets. This is the sort of thing where people want to drive long-term growth or really drive a successful project, and they're looking for the guys who have the experience, the runs on the board, they know how to drive these type of things for the right kind of company. So, I think like any good thing out there, you need to invest in it, and that's not just financial; it's time. And so, I think for those listening who want the type of creative agency that knows how to deliver on big projects and deliver that kind of growth, well, you should look up Battery. And I'm probably sure Anson has a bunch of people in his team who you'd probably end up speaking to, because I imagine he's a pretty busy guy. But look, certainly check them out. We will put some links to their business in the show notes, along with Anson's LinkedIn profile. Please, if you reach out to Anson, please make a note. Tell him that maybe you heard him on the podcast, so he understands kind of where you're coming from, and it's not just some random person saying connect. We are all people here, and it's I always laugh, Anson. You probably get this yourself. People just send you connection requests, and I liken it to standing in a bar and somebody just stands next to you and stares at you. It's just weird. I sort of going, what does this person want? I don't get it. So anyway. Anson, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for coming on the show and sharing your story. I'm really appreciative.
Thanks, Simon. I appreciate it. It was a lot of fun. It was my pleasure.
Cool. All right, guys, check out the show notes. Thanks for listening. And, if you want to connect with Anson, you can find the links in there, and we'll see you on the next episode.